Welcome back, Levelin Up Nation. This is your success strategist and host of the Levelin Up podcast, Brigham Blackham. I'm so grateful today. We have one of the inspirations for me becoming a storyteller on the call today.
The most important thing is you have to know the story that you're telling. And I don't mean know it, memorize it word for word. I mean, you have to know why you're telling it, what it means to you, and what you think it means to the audience. My goals in the very beginning were to be funny, to have audiences enjoy what I did, and to promote West Virginia in the best light possible.
Welcome back, Levelin Up Nation. This is your success strategist and host of the Levelin Up podcast, Brigham Blackham. I'm so grateful today. We have one of the inspirations for me becoming a storyteller on the call today. When I was a young kid, I went to the storytelling festival almost every single year with my group. We were part of this Christ-centered school, and we always went during the summer to experience storytelling. And I remember always going to look for Bil Lepp. He was someone that made me laugh, made me smile, made me think. We are going to be talking not just about storytelling in general, but he's got some truth bombs for us from his experience in storytelling. Also going to talk about how storytelling has built his career. So excited to have him on the call today. He is a dynamic person on stage, and we're going to have a wonderful conversation. So excited to have him on today. Welcome to the call, Bill. How you doing?
Doing well, thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being here. Let's first start off here. I know you've been doing this for quite a while now. It's something that is just part of you, but how did you get started in storytelling and saying, you know what, this is the career for me. This is how I want to add value to the world. I want to hear that origin story.
Yeah. You know, I get the feeling that you're like a business podcast, and I think
you got it.
You're going to find out that I'm an awful business person. Ever since I was in probably the fourth grade, I wanted to be a writer. And what I found out is that it's really difficult to get anyone to read anything that you've written. And so I struggled with that until I guess I was 20. Well, when I was probably 17, my older brother, Paul, he's passed away since, but he entered, we have a contest in West Virginia called the West Virginia Liars Contest. And it's a tall tale telling contest that's designed to perpetuate the art of storytelling in Appalachian culture. It's part of a much larger heritage festival that goes on every Memorial Day weekend. But you get up and you tell a 5-minute humorous tall tale. And my brother did that for about 3 years and won. And I thought to myself, I can do that. And so I remember very clearly sitting in my dorm room and writing a story. Thought to myself, you always want to be a writer. Here's a chance. So I sat down and I wrote a 5-minute story. And I went to the Liars Contest and I won second place.
Nice.
And I sort of had this revelation that, you know, I could combine these two things. I want to be a writer, but I can't get anyone to read anything I've written. But if I learn to tell it out loud, people have to listen to me, you know, unless they can't outrun me. So I write my stories, I learn them, and I wear snazzy running shoes, as I'm sure you're aware.
Yeah.
And then I was 20. I was a sophomore in college. I didn't know that there was any other storytelling in the whole wide world except the West Virginia Liars Contest and what people did around the Thanksgiving supper table, whatever. So I just did that for about 8 years. And in 1998, we had the West Virginia Storytelling Guild put on a storytelling festival in West Virginia that was mostly just West Virginia storytellers. But also they brought in a guy named Ed Stivender, who's a renowned national storyteller, been around for years. And I was blown away by what Ed did. He was the first person I ever met who was a professional full-time storyteller. So I was fascinated to find out that could be a job. And then I was just mesmerized by Ed's storytelling. More importantly, he really liked what I was doing. And so he gave my name to the National Storytelling Festival, which is in Jonesboro, Tennessee. And it's sort of the Broadway of storytelling. And they invited me to do a 15-minute spot in the year 2000. And everything took off from there. This is the National Storytelling Festival. 10 to 15,000 people come to this little town in Jonesboro, Tennessee. Wow. There's 6 tents, and each of them seat somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 people. So this event is called the Exchange Place. The only thing going on at the time, 6 unknown tellers that get to talk. And again, my presentation just really went well. And one of the things that happened was the people from the Timpanogos Storytelling Festival out there now in Lehigh, then in Orem, were in there, and they're scouting for new storytellers at that event. And so they saw me, and Timpanogos was one of the first major storytelling festivals to hire me to be a featured teller. And after that, things just took off. In 2003, I quit all of my other jobs and went full-time as a storyteller. It's been my full-time job ever since.
Wow. So 2003 to today, got multiple decades of experience, gone through a lot of hardship, but also a lot of amazing experiences. I would love to hear, what is one tip that you have for people that want to take this as a career path, go speak on stages, go be a storyteller, that you've learned that you're like, man, if I would have known this earlier, it would have made the path a lot smoother. What's that thing that you'd give them?
Gosh, I don't know. I mean, I've been real blessed, both with talent and a talent to tell on stage and talent to write these stories.
And good looks, right? That's it.
yeah, that's it. You just, if you don't have that, you're out of luck. No, but the most important things in the storytelling world are, you have to be doing something that no one else is doing. Of course, this is a task that is applicable to just about anything, certainly in the arts. And I was real fortunate that nobody was doing Appalachian-based tall tales when I came on the scene. So I filled that niche. And then when you tell a story, and you don't have to tell original stories on the storytelling circuit. There are plenty of people who tell traditional stories from all sorts of cultures and backgrounds. But the most important thing is you have to know the story that you're telling. And I don't mean know it, memorize it word for word. I mean, you have to know why you're telling it, what it means to you, and what you think it means to the audience. If you don't know these stories inside and out, if you don't understand the motivations of the characters and why the different circumstances are happening in the story, then you're going to come off to your audience as confused or bewildered. And if you don't come off as confident to your audience, then they're not going to trust you. And if you don't have the audience's trust, they're not going to be entertained by you. So you have to be doing something that nobody else is doing, and you have to know exactly why you're doing what you're doing.
Ooh, beautiful. So you have to make sure you build that trust with the audience, and that comes with knowing your stuff and really internalizing it. I thought that was a beautiful takeaway. Now, every single one of us have times where we are like, man, I think this could be a great story. How do you vet stories to say, you know what, this one's great, this one's good, that one, that gets to stay in the incubator until it becomes a little bit better? What are the selection process for you?
Yeah, in the beginning, it was easier because I only had 5 stories, and so I had to use them all.
Nice.
Didn't matter if they were good. But as I have grown as an artist, mainly what happens is I sit right here at this desk, and I'll have some kind of idea, and it can be anything: a used coffin salesman, or being stuck to the side of a train by my tongue and flying the train around the sky. I'll get any one of these crazy ideas. And the first thing that I need to do is convince myself that I can talk about that in a way that me and the audience have something in common. And if I can't establish some sort of commonality between me and the audience on that subject, then the story's not worth telling. Because again, I have to get the audience's trust. So let's say I'm going to tell a story where I become frozen on the side of a train by my tongue and fly a train around the sky, which is one of the stories I tell. I have to work backwards to get to a point where I know the audience and I can agree that this could happen. So if I started a story once I was frozen on the side of a train by my tongue, you would be like, no, I don't think you are. So I say, how could I become frozen on the side of a train by my tongue? Maybe I was walking the dog and he was chasing something. Why wouldn't I let go of the dog? Maybe I was tied to the dog. Why would I be tied to the dog? Because I'm an idiot. And it works all the way back till the first line of that story is, I have a dog. And so when I say I have a dog to the audience, I know that I'm going to fly a train by my tongue. But when I say I have a dog to the audience reaction is, oh, I have a dog too, because there's no dog agnostics. Even if you don't own a dog, you understand that people do have dogs. Yeah. So I say I have a dog. The next line is my dog has a name. And you as the audience are like, oh, what a coincidence. My dog also has a name. And then I say my dog can smell really well. And you're like, what? Get out. My dog can smell really well. So now we've established that I'm talking about a dog. And we can all agree that this is something that happens. And then I progress a little bit forward to let the audience know that the story is supposed to be funny. And then I tie myself. I say my dog is scared of guns and I need to cure him of being gun shy. So I tie a rope from his collar to my belt loop. We go outside. I have my rifle. I let him smell the bullet. I fire the gun and he chases the bullet. And so that's what I call gradual exaggeration. So I work back from the crazy idea till I get to the very point where we can establish that we have something in common. And then I do a gradual exaggeration until I can get you to buy into the story. And if I can't sit here at my desk and figure out a way to do that, I know it's never going to work in front of the audience. But then on the other hand, I have convinced myself that stories are good. And then I get up in front of an audience and they're not. It turns out I was wrong. Hubris or overconfidence or whatever. And sometimes there have been cases where I have been like, yeah, that story, it just needs to go back to the shop. And it just needs to go back to the shop and I need to find some other way to fit it out. And other times I can see that it's just going to take some tweaks. It's just going to take telling it on stage to various audiences before I figure out how it goes together. And I always tell myself, I tell workshops that I do, don't start judging a story until you've told it to at least 5 different audiences, because each audience has its own way of accepting and hearing a story. And if 5 audiences in a row, you don't get the reaction that you want, then there's something wrong with that story. But if you get a good reaction 2 out of 3 times, then you know that you at least have the core of a good story. And then it's just a matter of working back and forth on it on paper and with the audience to get where it's going.
That's a beautiful insight. Don't judge a story until you've shared it with multiple audiences, 5+. I think that takes a little bit of patience, because if you don't get the response immediately, we live in a microwave society at times. We're like, well, I just want the results now. I want people to know. But that's wisdom right there, letting us know that there are times when it will take a little bit of different perspectives to know if this is a useful story. Now, Bill, I know you have done a lot of different things to promote yourself. You've got, CDs, you've written books. What has been the most financially beneficial way that you've monetized your message?
Well, in the old days, it was CDs, but people have entirely quit buying any art. So it's, I'm not kidding. Probably a third of my income has gone away since people quit buying CDs.
Yeah.
They don't buy books as much as they bought CDs. We used to be able to count on going to a storytelling festival and a third or more of the people there. So I don't mean individuals, but groups of people, families or whatever. A third of those people would buy a CD for $15. And then we would get 85% of that. And that was a huge boon. And that's just gone away. So what I've been doing now for the last 2 or 3 years is looking for different ways to have that side income. And again, I've done 2 books since then, but they just don't sell as well.
Yeah.
So almost all of my money now comes from going to storytelling festivals and standing on stage. And then I do a lot of other storytelling programs. I do a lot of dinners for businesses, a lot of corporate holiday suppers, and I work for our state parks. I go to about 6 or 7 different West Virginia state parks every year and tell to those audiences. And what I found is that the best way to get hired storytelling is to go and do a show, and somebody in that audience hires you to come to their festival, to their library, to their Kiwanis Club, to their church spaghetti dinner. And not just because of that, but as part of that, or that being part of it, I try to never, ever take a show off. Every time I go and do a show, it doesn't matter how small it is or how big it is, I do the absolute best job that I can do. because I know that I'm not just entertaining the audience, I'm also applying for a job. So it's imperative that everywhere I go, I do the best job possible. And I don't always get a job out of every audience that I speak to, but I bet 50% of the audiences that I speak to, I get a job out of that.
Wow. That's a really interesting insight. And I think it's brilliant. If you always do your very best on stage, it's almost like that is your business card, that's your marketing, that's your sales team. Every single time you're on stage, you look around and any one of them at some point will need a speaker, will need a storyteller, will need a way to communicate with someone on stage and say, hey, I remember Bill on stage, or I remember Brigham on stage. I really want to make sure that I connect with him for our next event. Because people don't need a speaker until they need a speaker.
Right.
They don't need a storyteller until they need a storyteller. So you crush it, and then you give people that opportunity to remember.
Well, I don't usually do it at festivals as much because it's not as appropriate, but other shows that I do, the last 3 minutes I'm on stage, I say, this is my full-time job. This is what I do for a living. If you need a speaker, I'm your man. And then I give my web address and my email address, and I say, it doesn't matter what it is. I mean, I say Cub Scout Blue and Gold Banquet, church spaghetti dinner, library, elementary school, junior high school, college, old folks home. Yeah. I'm your man. And so because I think some people have a tendency to think that I'm already out of their price range because I'm standing on a stage in front of 2,000 people. Or at Timpanogos, when we do the amphitheater at Thanksgiving Point, there's 5,000 people in the audience. And I think individual people think, well, anybody that stands and talks in front of 5,000 people, I can't afford. But that's not true. You can afford me. I can come and do your show. We can work something out. So I just try and let the audience know that this is what I do. I'm available.
That's interesting because you're able to break down that sales barrier while you're on stage. You take that stress away, and then you give those opportunities the opportunity that they need. You say, hey, this is something that you could potentially afford. Let's have a conversation at least.
Right.
So I know some speakers will really lean into doing a lot of free gigs because they can sell from stage. What's been your experience doing that? I'm sure as a speaker, sometimes you'll be like, hey, this is a free gig, but that's because I can sell and I know I'll make money on the back end. What has been your experience with that?
About the only time I do free gigs is when they're local and it's for kids. I don't do, I can't remember the last time I did. Oh, well, we did I think the last time I did something for free is we did when the Hurricane Helene hit last October, the National Storytelling Festival got canceled because it was basically in the heart of in the Appalachian region that got hit. Not in the heart, but close to it, in the liver anyway. And so 5 of us went down and did a benefit show in a theater to raise money, not for the festival, but for the people that were hit in Appalachia by the Storytelling Festival. And I didn't do that to get jobs. That was, hopefully, I just did that out of the goodness of my heart. Otherwise I don't, it's not worth it to me at this point to give away a gig to try and get a gig, because I can get a gig while I'm doing a paid gig.
Right. I think that's brilliant, especially in the farther parts of your stage time where you're like, hey, I've been doing this for a while. You don't need to give away your opportunities to speak. So I think that's excellent. One of the things I'm really impressed with from you is you've been able to take your heritage, you've been able to take these tall tales and package it in such a way that it makes it completely unique from anyone else I've ever seen on stage. How did you discover this was your niche? And then how did you stay in this niche so that it can become a career? Because sometimes people do something for a short time and they get that shiny object syndrome. How do you stay on task and really build this into a career?
At the Liars Contest here in West Virginia, you have 5 minutes. You have 3 judges and an audience of 400 people that you have to impress. And the best way to win the Liars Contest, and again, my brother Paul sort of established this, because it's the West Virginia Liars Contest, your story should take place in, be relevant to, or be about West Virginia in some way, even if it's just peripheral. If you don't have that aspect, you're almost certainly not going to win the Liars Contest. It's just the way it is. It's one of the most subjective contests I've ever been involved in. And so after doing the Liars Contest for 8 years, I had these 8 stories that were West Virginia centric.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, they were also Appalachian. Now, I didn't set out to be an Appalachian storyteller. That wasn't my goal.
Mm-hmm.
It just turns out that I'm a storyteller from Appalachia who tells stories about Appalachia, therefore. And as I got out on the national scene, I didn't know how long this was going to last. I mean, people were paying me to show up and talk, just do something that I'd like to do anyway. And I thought, let's just see how long we can make this work. And so my goals in the very beginning were to be funny, to have audiences enjoy what I did, and to promote West Virginia in the best light possible. And so almost all of my stories still take place in West Virginia, have some aspect of West Virginia in them. And as I developed a repertoire, I just had, 50, 100 stories. I don't know how many stories I have that are just this pro West Virginia, pro Appalachia thing that's going on. And so it was never, it wasn't never intentional, but it wasn't, I wasn't looking 20 years down the road. I was just thinking this works now. And once it worked now, I thought, well, this is the way. Nobody else is doing this. So I need to establish that if you want Appalachian tall tale, even if someone comes up after me, that Bil Lepp is the foundation of this in the storytelling world. And so I need to be the absolute best I can every time I write one of these stories. So again, it wasn't something that I was looking at 20 years ago thinking I need to do this. But once I was 10 years in, 5 years in, I thought this is what I really need to double down on and make sure that I'm the absolute best at this. And since then, again, when I started out, my stories were just funny. But now that I go back to the same places a lot, I mean, I've been to the Timpanogos Storytelling Festival, I don't know how many times, 10, 11, 12 times. So I've established a trust with that audience. And now, and not just that audience, but audiences around the country.
Yeah.
And now I can do more 20 years into this than I could do when I started. I don't have to just be funny. Now I slip a little bit more meaning into my stories as I go along. Because again, I know that the audience trusts me, and they know Ed Stuyvesant says you should never take the audience hostage, meaning that you shouldn't get up there and tell a story or just give some diatribe about what you believe, whether they believe it or not, because it's not our job at a festival to change somebody's mind. We're just there as entertainment. However, now that I've established trust, I can work more, I think, meaning into my stories than I used to be able to do, or than I was comfortable doing.
I absolutely love that idea of you first have to establish trust with that audience. That might mean you have to come back a handful of times, but also just doing what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it. If you're on stage for 5 minutes and you hit your 5-minute mark and you delivered what you were told you have your mission to do, you built trust with the audience and you delivered on it. And you consistently deliver time after time, people will start to know, like, and trust you. And that's the foundations of any business. So let's talk about this. When you are building your business, there are lots of different ways that I want to say are detours that lead to nowhere. And then there's some detours that are like a hard stop. Like, oh, that's a really good choice to never do again. What are some of those detours or experiences that you've had that have helped you realize, oh, I need to get back on this path. This is the way for me?
I don't think I got anything for you there. I don't do things. I'm sure I've done things that failed, but I'm thinking more just individual stories. I haven't really changed course much. I mean, what I'm doing gets me what I want. And so I just keep doing it and it keeps working. Now, again, it's getting more difficult. A lot of funding is being cut for festivals. Some festivals are closing down. COVID killed a lot of festivals. Well, there's an example. I hated doing Zoom. And I know some people that really benefited from doing Zoom shows during COVID are now getting hired other places internationally. I was just never good at it. It's God bless Zoom, and it's a wonderful thing, but it wasn't made for comedy because there's a delay and I can't hear or see the audience. And so I would get 10 minutes into a 30-minute story and realize that I hadn't taken a breath because I hadn't paused, because there's no audience to react. And so I also didn't try and get better at it. I realized it was miserable and I hated it. And I was like, we're just going to have to hope that this isn't the next big thing. So I didn't start Zoom, obviously. I didn't, but it was definitely, I was not nearly as successful as other people doing Zoom. And it's interesting because my oldest child was in college at the time and straight A student practically. And then Zoom came along and I fully understood, because it's just not the same. It just wasn't the same performance. It just wasn't the same venue. The only thing I liked about it is my living room was my stage and my green room. So I could just lie on the couch until it's my turn to stand up. So I didn't like that. I don't do that. I know people that do things online and do workshops and do coaching. It's just, I could probably make money doing that, but I'm just, I'm physically uncomfortable doing it. And so I haven't really pursued it. So again, mostly I just do what I like to do, and it brings in the money. I think one of the things I have to say is, our family is comfortable. We have a nice house. We eat. We've sent the kids to college, and that's enough for us. I'm not interested in making, I mean, if somebody offered me millions of dollars, don't get me wrong, I'd take it. But because my goal isn't to make a fortune doing this. My goal is to make enough money to sustain an adequate lifestyle. And that's where we are. And so I don't have to go down routes that I don't want to go down, because I don't want to, I'm not trying to sell my soul here. Now, I will say that I did a television show. I got an email from a guy whose job it is to make television shows. And so I ended up doing a show called Man versus History on the History Channel. And it was an unscripted television show where we went around the country and looked into, like, did Ben Franklin really tie a key to a kite, that kind of thing. And what was interesting about that was, so I was 50, I guess, when we started doing that. The crew are people who shoot shows like Dual Survivor and Naked and Afraid and other unscripted reality programs. And they were sort of fascinated by the fact that I wasn't there to be the next, I don't know, Kim Kardashian, or that's the only person I can name who came out of reality television. I just wanted to do this show. And if it worked, it worked. I wasn't, it's not that I didn't try hard. It's not that I didn't want to be successful, but I didn't think it was my next step to stardom. And so I think the crew appreciated the fact that I wasn't coming in there some sort of hot shot, I'm going to be the next thing kind of guy. I just wanted to do each episode and make them good. And we didn't get picked up for another season, but that's not my fault. So I'm willing to try new things, especially things that are interesting, but I'm not chasing the almighty dollar all day long.
I think that's a beautiful way to say, this is what I want. And you've designed your life based on what you want. And nobody can say that's not success. For me, my favorite definition of success is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal, Earl Nightingale. And it sounds like you've not only found success, you've been able to surround yourself with other people that you love to be around, specifically helped your goals be able to become a reality, like taking your kids and sending them through college, got a comfortable living. That's amazing. So just if you think about this, your biggest passion was getting your stories out there, letting people hear them and see them and interface with them. I remember you made a deep impact on me when I was a little kid. I saw you many times at the Timpanogos Storytelling Festival. If it wasn't for that festival, I don't know if we would have been connected, because I've never been to West Virginia. So you coming out to Utah made a huge impact on me. And it so much so that now my career is all based on helping people that are speakers want to be able to improve their storytelling for business. And I was like, you know what? You have a very unique way to approach storytelling. Would you mind sharing one of your favorite stories? I mean, I want people to be like, oh, this is the stuff that Bill is known for. What would be a story that you're like, this is one that audience would love?
How much time do we have?
Let's say 5 minutes. Is that fair?
I'll just do sort of a synopsis here.
Okay.
So my buddy Skeeter, he's been my best friend for my whole life. We were 16 years old. It was the night of the next morning was going to be buck season. And I was sitting in my living room watching a television show at 2 a.m, waiting for the sun to come up to go hunting, when there was a knock at the back door, and I knew it had to be Skeeter. And I didn't want to answer the door because I knew if Skeeter was knocking on my door at 2 a.m. the day before buck season, he'd come up with one of his plans. But there was no free will involved. I was sucked to the back door, and I opened it up, and there stood Skeeter. And he had a he had a diabolical grin on his face and a paper bag in his hand. And he didn't say anything, but I invited him in anyway. It was like letting a vampire into my house. I gave him all the power. We sat down at the kitchen table, and he said, "I've been up all night sewing." Well, I wasn't used to my best buddy sewing. I didn't know what to think of that. But he reached down, he opened up that paper bag. He reached in, and he pulled out something long and brown and furry. He flipped it open and pulled it on his head, and by gosh, that kid could sew. What he had made was a perfect replica of an 8-point buck's head. And he said to me from inside that deer mask, he said, "Don't worry, I made one for you too." Well, I knew that couldn't be the whole plan. And after a minute, Skeeter said, "That ain't the whole plan." He said, "I also took a mannequin. I dressed him in hunter's orange, and I tied him to the hood of my truck. What we are going to do is drive around town like it's people season, and we got one." Well, he said, "It's hilarious. We'll take it to the check-in station. We'll check our human. Everybody will think it's funny." And it was funny. But it's precisely the sort of funny that you don't want your dad to find out that it was you who did it. So we decided to go hide out. We went up the old service road at the state park. We were sitting there in Skeeter's truck. Skeeter had just got his truck brand new that summer, only had 80,000 miles on the odometer. But the odometer was in the glove box and was mechanically disassociated from every other part of the vehicle. And the first time I'd ever gone to roll down the passenger side window, I took about 3 turns on the window crank, and the window just went thunk. It fell down. We never saw it again, which was fine in the summer because the truck didn't have air conditioning. But that night, it was 20 degrees. This was late November. The wind was blowing right in that open window. There was frost building up on both sides of the windshield. We didn't have enough money to run the engine, to run the heater for 6 hours. I don't know if I made this clear, but Skeeter and I are pretty dumb. And so we weren't dressed properly. I was freezing to death. Finally, I reached in that bag, pulled out one of those deer masks, and put it on. Well, it was warm and cozy inside that mask, and Skeeter put his mask on, and pretty soon we fell asleep. Well, when I fell asleep, my head fell right out that open window. And you know how sometimes when you're sleeping, your subconscious will pick up on something that's happening and be like, "Get up, do something." But other times, maybe like a snake crawled into your bed, your subconscious will just be like, "Now, open your eyes, but don't move." Well, that's what my subconscious was telling me. So I opened my eyes, and sure enough, the sun was just starting to turn the sky gray, and about 30 yards down the road, there were 2 bright lights, maybe 3 feet off the ground, 6 feet apart. And I could barely make out the silhouette of a large American sedan. And as the sun came up over the mountaintop, 2 sunbeams came down that mountain, up that dirt road, across the back of that car, over the top of that car. And one of those sunbeams went through a blue light, and one of those sunbeams went through a red light. The door of that car opened up, and Sheriff Hasbro started to get out. Now, Sheriff Hasbro was the law in our community, and he started making his way toward that truck. And I was laying there, still pretending to be asleep, thinking to myself, the smartest thing to do is to do nothing. But the smartest thing isn't really my strong suit. And then I started thinking, I don't know, I grew up in a small town, and what you learn as a teenager in a small town is that the police don't always have enough to do. And so they come looking for you to see what you're doing. And Skeeter and I were conscientious young men. So we endeavored to participate in activities which allowed local law enforcement to practice the skills that they had learned at the academy. And I thought to myself, how many times in your life do you have the opportunity to scare the pants off the duly elected officials of your county? I thought, I'm just going to make a little deer noise. So I went like that. Now, I'm not saying it was a good deer noise, but it was effective. Sheriff Hasbro, he was like 6'8". He jumped so high that Skeeter had time to start the truck, defrost the windshield, and drive underneath Sheriff Hasbro before he ever came back down. We made our way around that sheriff's car, headed on into town. Now, we were 16 years old. We weren't lawyers. But he had never said freeze. He hadn't said you're under arrest. He hadn't read us our rights. How were we supposed to know we were in trouble? Who knew that it was illegal to impersonate a deer? So we just headed on into town. Now, the road in Virginia is pretty straight by West Virginia standards, but it is one of these up and down jobs. And after a little while, we could see that sheriff's car coming up over the hills behind us. Now, he still wasn't gaining on us. I wanted to find out what was going on, so I turned on the CB, switched it to the police channel just in time to hear Tom say, Tom was the deputy. He said, no, just in time to hear Sheriff Hasbro say, Tom, he said, Tom, I don't care if you think I am crazy. There are 2 deer driving Skeeter Bart's pickup truck down the highway. And I believe they got Skeeter tied to the hood. And Tom said, well, good. Well, you can see where that might hurt our feelings. I switched off the CB and we headed into town. But this was 1986. This was before the internet, before CNN. We didn't even get public radio back there in $50. So what people did for their news and information in the morning was turn on their police scanners. So when we came around the corner into Main Street, there were people lined up and down both sides of the street drinking coffee with their curlers in. I wanted to find out what was going on, so I switched the CB back on just in time to hear Tom say, Sheriff Hasbro, I called the FBI, just like you said. And the FBI called Animal Control. And Animal Control said you should consider them 2 deer armed and dangerous. They said you're allowed to use lethal force if necessary. Well, that was a little bit more than we had bargained for. So Skeeter pulled to the side of the road. Sheriff Hasbro pulled in behind us. And after a minute, he got out of his car and came over, made us take off our masks and yelled at us for a good long time. Gave us each a ticket for the crime of mayhem, dressed as an 8-point buck. We each had to pay a little fine and do a little community service. But I think what we learned from this is they say that true forgiveness only comes after you have honestly repented of your sins, after you promise to never do the same thing again, and after you swear to never take any glory from the original action. So I think I can safely say, with that in mind, that Skeeter and I will never be forgiven for what we did that day.
Yes.
Thank you.
So good. Thank you. Brighten everyone's day that hears that. Oh my gosh, so funny. I remember that story. That was one that you've shared multiple times. It's so good.
Yeah, it's one of the first stories I wrote. I mean, probably the first 10. It was probably could have been number 10. And it's been real good to me. It's been super successful throughout my career. I mean, I wrote it probably in 1996, I think. So it's almost 30 years old and still ticking.
Still funny, still relatable. And I can picture every single moment of that. Just him hanging in the air, you defrost the windows and drive out into him. It's a great visual. I love it. And you said that was one that you've used in the Liars contest as well, right?
No, that's a post Liars contest story.
Oh, that's awesome. Now, as far as moving your career forward, what does that look like? What are you looking to accomplish before you say, you know what, storyteller hat has been hung, I'm retired. I don't know if you'll ever retire. I know I don't want to ever retire, but a lot of people, you're like, you know what, I'm gonna take my step out of the public eye. What would be something that you're like, man, I'd love to accomplish this before I'm done?
Well, when I started out, when I first started getting hired on the national scene, my goal was to go 10 years. I felt if I could be near the top of the game for 10 years, that I would really feel like I'd established some credibility and had sustainability. And now it's been 23 years. So I don't see a reason to retire. Donald Davis is the patriarch of American storytelling. He's 80, 81. He's still cranking it out. I get paid to travel. People pay my travel. They pay my hotel room, and I get to go places like Utah for a week. And then when I'm not on stage, I can, run down to one of a myriad national parks that's around and do some incredible hiking, see beautiful things, get to go places most people don't get to go. By the time my children were 15, they'd each been to 35 or 40 states, got to see things that people in their 30s had never seen. So it's a beautiful job. It's a wonderful job. I don't want to say it's not hard, but I don't like to pretend that I'm a coal miner or I work on a steel mill, right? My job's not hard like that. So I don't see a reason to retire. what do people do when they retire? They travel. Well, let somebody else pay for my travel while I go and work a little bit over the weekend. My goal is to continue to produce new material that's relevant and that still resonates. When I get to a point where I feel like the stories I'm producing are no longer the quality that they were, I want to be aware of that and then step away. I don't want to be, I mean, I'm not going to call anyone out in particular, but I don't want to be one of these 80-year-old rockers who's still traveling on a song they wrote in the 70s. And that's really the only thing they've done, right? I mean, I wouldn't feel genuine if I was doing that. I would, when I get tired of a story, I quit telling it for a while, even if it's, even if it's a crowd pleaser. So I want to stay, as I said, relevant and resonate with the audience. And if I feel like I'm not doing that anymore, that's when I'll hopefully throw in my hat.
Oh, I think that's a great way to think about it. Are you creating content that people connect with, that they love, that they're like, man, this is great? One of the things I'm really impressed with you is your ability to create vivid imagery. Like that story was a great example of that. I always remember pretty much anytime I see you on stage, you have jeans on and a hat. How did you come up with that persona as far as a stage persona? Because everyone has different shticks that say, hey, this is who I am. You just seem very comfortable in your hat, usually a t-shirt, if I remember right, and your really nice sneakers and
you got to remember the t-shirt's tucked into my jeans and I'm wearing a belt, which is a stupid thing. But this is why. The first year that I was in the Liars contest, I told a story where I say I'm on a train and the train is going the speed of sound. And there's so much friction. The railroad ties are catching on fire. The railroad tracks are melting away. And then I say, at the rate we were moving, I guess I was pretty lucky I hadn't lost my hat. And at that point, I touched the bill of my hat. So that was the first story I ever told. And therefore, it was a necessary story because I had to tell it. If I was going to go tell stories somewhere, I had to tell that story. Mm-hmm. And therefore, I had to have a hat on. And then my most successful story at the Liars contest, the one where I become frozen inside of a train by my tongue, I say that I tie the dog from his collar to my belt loop, and I reach down and I, put my finger through my belt loop and pull it just as an illustration of what I mean. And so at that point, I had to tuck my shirt in and I had to wear a belt. I guess I didn't have to wear a belt, but it's bad enough to tuck your shirt into jeans. It's even stupider if you tuck your shirt into jeans and you're not wearing a belt. All right. There is some GQ fashion advice from Bil Lepp. So those were 2 of the 5 stories that I had. They were 2 of the best 5 stories that I had. And everywhere I went, I was telling one or both of those stories. So I had to have on jeans, or I didn't have to have on jeans, but I had to have on my shirt tucked in and a hat on. And so then it just became who Bil Lepp was. Bil Lepp wears a hat, puts his hands in his back pocket, leans backward, and is in a t-shirt and jeans. So it has become my costume. Now, if you saw me walking down the street, that's probably what I'm wearing. My shirt's not tucked in, but that's what I'm wearing. So it's just one of those things that just because of what I was telling, I had to have that on. And it's funny because a lot of storytellers are in sort of the same position. Donald Davis always wears a bow tie. I don't know when that started or why that started, but if Donald Davis walked on stage without a bow tie, he would get yelled at. And I'm serious. I walked on stage one time. I was in Jonesboro, Tennessee, and I'd forgotten my hat. I used to carry a spare hat in my car because I know people. It's like when Tony Bennett showed up without his toupee on, people would get really upset. I walked down on stage. I didn't have my hat on, and some lady goes, "Where's your hat?" I hadn't even said a word, and she screams it out from the audience. So it's part of the persona, for good or bad, and I almost always have to do it. In fact, I thought before I do this pod show, do I need to put my hat on? But I think we're okay.
I think we're okay. This is a little more casual conversation as far as that goes. But I just vividly remember that's the persona, and every time I saw you, I was like, oh, he delivered on that consistently.
Well, and I mean, honestly, it's part of what it didn't start out this way, but it has become now. Again, I try and promote West Virginia, Appalachia in the best light possible. And so one of the ways I do that, I mean, I try and do it subtly, is I stand up on stage. The MC says, I'm from West Virginia. Bill Lepp's from West Virginia. I'm wearing a t-shirt. I'm wearing faded jeans and a hat. And the audience thinks, oh, this is exactly the person I expect from West Virginia. I mean, I could be wearing overalls, but people, I immediately fit the stereotype that a lot of people have about West Virginia. And then in that outfit, through my stories, through my characters, I start to dispel those stereotypes almost immediately in my telling. My characters have thicker accents than I have. They're probably dressed like I'm dressed, which is fine because I want you to imagine them that way. And they don't necessarily have formal education. They're from a small town in West Virginia, but they can quote Shakespeare and Newtonian laws and are wise and generous and kind people. And so I want to, it's sort of deliberate. My visual presentation is to trick you into thinking that I'm the stereotype and then to break out of that stereotype.
That's wonderful. You give them the mold that they can at least identify and say, oh, this is what I think he's going to be like. And then you say, well, this is actually what it's like. So that's beautiful. I'm glad that I know the behind the scenes of why you do that. That's so cool. Well, thank you for sharing that. Is there any specific thing you'd like to tell the audience to go check out from either your background, your books? Let us know where they can find more of your materials.
This is a book called The King of Little Things. It's my children's book. It won a Penn Award for storytelling. I mean, for children's book writing. And it's a book about, there's a king, he's the king of little things. And then there's a king called King Normus, who is greedy and wants to take over the world. And the king of little things is not greedy. He's generous and kind. And through the course of the story, King Normus finds out that it's the little things that matter the most. Mm-hmm. And so it's a story about what I was speaking about earlier, is being kind of satisfied with the point that I've achieved in my life, being satisfied with living adequately. That's how I like to end the story. It's not how the book ends, but that, you know, living adequately is good. But it's also a really fun story. It's got beautiful illustrations by a guy named David Wenzel. You can find it anywhere that they sell books online. You'd be hard pressed to find them in a bookstore probably, but it's a great book. And I think everybody should check that out. The King of Little Things.
The King of Little Things. I'll make sure to put that little Amazon link on there. A little bit of research will find it. Well, thank you so much, Bill. Really appreciate your example as a storyteller. Love your content. I hope that you guys go like and follow him on Facebook, on his different social media channels. And what was your website one more time so they can know?
leppstorytelling.com.
Easy. leppstorytelling.com. Phenomenal. Guys, always a pleasure to connect with amazing people like this. We're going to keep giving you great content every single day that I can. Every single week, we've got a new person we're interviewing. And remember, if you have some stage fright, you're like, oh, I want to do this, but I don't know how to do this. I've got my 3 reasons stage fright costs and why you must fix it. Get that download, connect with me. Happy to help you in any way that I can with your storytelling journey in your business. Because if you can share your story in an imaginative, meaningful way, really tie into your audience, your business will progress. Because that's all that marketing is a great, well-told story. So Bill, thanks again for being on today, and we will talk to you next time. God bless, guys.
Thanks for having me. See you in September.
Yeah, we'll see you then.